The other thing I wanted to hit with you is Israel. So Donald Trump, of course, put out his 20-point peace plan. And in putting that 20-point peace plan out, him and Netanyahu had kind of bumped heads together, basically saying, hey, what do we agree with? And they made a plan that is in Israel's interest. The entire plan is effectively given from Israel's perspective. All right. There were multiple accounts of Hamas's point of view. In some cases, people were saying that there were elements of Hamas that didn't agree on it, other elements that did, in which case there was a disagreement on the plan coming from the Hamas perspective. Recently, however, Hamas has said, look, there are things in this plan that we need to discuss and negotiate. And so apparently there are negotiations that are taking place now. And this is per Sputnik that several countries are kind of putting their heads together. Egypt, Qatar, Turkish, Israeli, and the US are all negotiating over the plan itself. Now, part of the issue with the plan, and there are many, has to do with this idea of, well, wait a minute. Netanyahu came out immediately and said there will be no state, and Trump agrees with me on that. So there's that. B, there's so many holes in the plan. There's this question of whether Trump will get involved, if indeed, which Israel will do, violate the plan. And people like me who look at this say, well, dude, they violated every other plan that they've come up with. Why wouldn't they violate this? And in every case, either administration, whether it was the Joe Biden administration or the Trump administration, Donald Trump turned a blind eye, and Witkoff would turn around and blame Hamas, regardless of whether Hamas has been begging to end this war. And it's been Israel over and over and over again. Even Matt Miller, that degenerate that was in the Biden administration, pointed out how any deal that came up with Netanyahu effectively would scuttle. Recently, Donald Trump was asked, hey, if Israel violated the deal, or effectively, how would you stop Israel from violating the deal? Listen to his answer, because I think his answer gives context to the point of view that I take on this.
Possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. The primary guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen, look, they're in negotiations right now. We are going to do everything possible. We have a lot of power, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. Okay?
Caleb, that means nothing.
Yes.
Coming from Donald Trump, that means absolutely, that is worth spit in a jar.
Right.
Like, that is nothing. But Hamas seems to be legitimately considering it. And what they're fighting over, or what they're negotiating over, is, well, this plan says nothing about where Israeli troops are going to be, because they're still maintaining themselves in Gaza. And so you could still have a situation where, according to Netanyahu, well, our troops aren't moving, or the troops effectively just stay. And yet there's still this expectation that Hamas implements the deal. This is one of the things that the Hamas is negotiating over their own drop site, breaking this down. Give me a take on this. And why is Hamas considering this deal, considering they know, they have to know, that any provocation by Israel, the U.S. is going to turn a blind eye?
Well, my understanding of the deal is that Gaza would not go under the direct control of Israel. They would create another body that would rule Gaza, but Hamas would be militarily, kind of uprooted, right?
Tony Blair.
Yeah, and that's kind of the proposal, is that there would be, another body that would run Gaza. Hamas would be militarily uprooted, and then there's supposed to be a road to statehood in it, but then Netanyahu said that's not actually the case. And, I don't know. I mean, again, it looks like a bad deal for the Palestinians, but at the same time, I mean, they're in a very bad situation. And I mean, they need the killing to stop. And
yes.
I mean, it's not a good situation at all for the Palestinians, but it is a situation where, in theory, Israel could be forced to stop the killing. Gaza would not be directly under Israel's control. There would be other entities involved. I mean, I don't know. It's all, I mean, do you remember when Hamas got elected? Do you remember when they yes. Israel was, basically the whole international community demanded that the Palestinians have an election. And so they elected Hamas. And then ever since then, it's been like, oh no, they can't do that. They elected terrorists and all. Like, that was the Bush thing, right? We're bringing democracy, right? Democracy, we need democracy. The people in Gaza voted for Hamas to be their government. And ever since then, there has been, oh my God, how dare they? And it's like that Hamas won the election. It was they had an election. The international community, the United States, We demand that the Palestinians have an election. It was a very, very fair election. And even according to all kinds of critics and all that, they said, yeah, Hamas won the election. So, but since then, it has just been the policy of Israel. No, they cannot have Hamas be their government. It's been the policy of the United States, been the policy of everyone. No, they're not allowed to have Hamas be their government. And that led to this whole situation. And I will say, I saw some of the videos of October 7th commemorations, and I was out in the streets. I did, covered quite a few rallies yesterday, and I can talk about that. But, you watch some of these videos of October 7th, and I'm watching it, and Israelis are describing, okay, I was in my house and these people kicked open the door and all this. And I'm thinking, well, gee, that's never happened to a Palestinian before. I mean,
Right.
my goodness. Yeah. And it's like, you have to wonder, like, are the people who watch these pro-Israel, videos, it's like all the trauma from October 7th. It's like, yeah, this is all really, really awful. But you do notice that the Palestinians have been going through quite a lot, but it's like, they don't, like, somehow it just like they have this blank spot. Anything that happens to the Palestinians, it's all fake. It's all Pallywood. It's all, oh, it didn't really happen, or they shouldn't be here, or they're actually Jordanians, or there's some like weird excuse. So like all the atrocities the Palestinians have been through year after year after year just don't exist. And then we're just supposed to cry for what happened to the Israelis on October 7th. And then, yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy.
It's very surreal.
Yeah. And the other thing though, so I was in the streets in New York. I covered, so there were 3 rallies that I ended up covering yesterday, and I'm going to post video of them soon. I'm just going to edit and all of that. So I went to one rally in the Bronx. It was very small, but it was put on by a group. I can't remember their name, like anti-imperialist something or other. It was kind of a small group of like college-aged young people. And then they assembled at the Israeli consulate. They didn't have a permit, and it was a small group of people, but they all had their faces covered up. And they burned an American flag and an Israeli flag in front of the consulate. And there was kind of a scuffle, and 2 of them were arrested. And it was kind of a small rally, but they were making a point of being very, very theatrical. And it was weird because it was a small rally, but a lot of media was there covering it, right? They didn't have a permit, and they were close to the consulate, on 2nd Avenue. And they were like, the streets were kind of blocked off. So they were like in the streets, and they were kind of surrounded by police, and they burned an Israeli flag and an American flag, and then, and then they moved on. And then I went to the Fox News building. There was a really big crowd outside of Fox News. There was about 1,000 people outside of Fox News. It was your typical, Free Palestine rally in New York City. It was the, big rally outside of Fox News. They had the drums, and I think it was In Our Lifetime. They had their rally. So I did get to interview people there and all of that. And I don't know. I mean, it was interesting. The rally that got all this media attention, that was very, very small. I mean, there were probably less than 15 of these like college age young people. They were almost trying to redo the 1960s, right? They had a big banner that said "Bring the war home," and they all had their faces covered in the keffiyehs, and they were shouting, curse words, kind of, this fucking system, we need to fucking overthrow it. And it was some kind of like, they were almost kind of trying to, have the aesthetic of the 1960s weatherman or something like that. Bring the war home, kind of, I thought that was odd. I will say though, that one part of having a demonstration is theater, right? You got to play the part, and they did a much better job of that. I mean, even though their rallies were small, I mean, they did burn the flags, and they did, have their faces covered, and they, so they did it very theatrically, but it was quite small. And it was almost, again, kind of like they were playing a character. And I see a lot of this in politics, right? On both sides, when people are kind of reenacting or playing a character, right? That seems to be a lot of how our politics, it's we're trying to make sense of the weird moment our country is in right now, because we're in a very, very strange moment. And so everyone's trying to look for somebody from the past that they can kind of dress up as, and just like on the right, they're trying to be Ronald Reagan. Well, this is not the Reagan era. I mean, things have really changed. It's like they're trying to be the 60s left, which again, this isn't the 1960s. The Palestinians are not the Vietnamese. I mean, it's a complicated situation. I mean, some things obviously overlap, like imperialism, etc. But, it's a different situation. And I don't know. I look at American politics. It's almost like we don't quite know what we're doing. We're in this new era, and nothing seems to make sense. And we're trying to reenact our past, but our past is distant, and these were different times. We're in completely new territory now. Information technology is changing how people interact with politics, how people understand themselves, even the nature of their own identity. and that you can't recreate the past. I mean, things are different. Politics, as it was, in the boomer generation, politics before that, we're in just a new time where we need to kind of innovate and figure out what to do. So
I think it's somebody made the point of saying, what was it like to live in Rome when it was in decline? It's that. It's like things don't work. Things like meaning the political space doesn't work. I mean, for God's sake, we're having a conversation. The government is shut down, right? Yeah. I forget who I was talking to yesterday. I think it was Ted Rawl. Ted Rawl pointed out that when the pilot contacted air traffic control, they got a message effectively saying nobody is here. Like the stuff doesn't work. Like the Baltimore Bridge that was hit when that huge ship went AWOL. Well, that still hasn't been rebuilt. Wow. California, the inability to build high-speed rail, NASA budget being cut. And people may think that's small. I think that's major. Because, if you think back to what the United States was in its quote-unquote glory days, where it's like we put a man on the moon, and Kennedy is giving a speech. It was like, God damn it, we're putting a man on the moon. And it's like, this country that is only a few hundred years old is literally looking at a body in space and saying, we're going to do that. We don't have the ability to do it yet. We're going to do it. Damn it. That's what we're going to do. Why does a man go to the mountains? Why does, Navy play Army in the football league? I mean, he makes this amazing speech with this culmination. We're going to put a man on the goddamn moon. And now we don't even do that. Even that budget is being cut. This ability to look beyond ourselves into this kind of larger realm of transcendence. Done. Gone. This is where we are. Purely domestic, purely locked into this. No, I think I understand your point. People are looking back to something to find some level of solidity and identity in a time where this country is no longer what this country was, and it's becoming very clear that that's the case. It's declining. It's a degradation. There was something else you said. You're talking about. Well, let me go to this part. You're saying that the killing needs to stop. Agreed. But is Hamas going to give up their guns? That seems to be a red line. I don't, like, they would have to trust, we'll give up our weapons, we'll give up the hostages, and we're going to completely and entirely trust Israel to do what they say they're going to do in the deal, even though they've never done it in the deal.
Right.
And isn't there another way to look at this? That, yes, the killing needs to stop. Yes, Israel has been able to murder a huge number of people. But the fact that Israel wants a deal in this way, meaning they've lost so many of their soldiers. I mean, the numbers is in tens of thousands. You may have an Israel that is exhausted, and that exhaustion is pushing them to try to get something in order to give their people a rest, which is not an indication of Israel in this kind of brimming, powerful way that may be more illusionary. This may be an exhausted military that is looking for any breather that it can get, even if it has to go through some level of a deal in this way to get that breather. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, Israel being exhausted is absolutely the case. I mean, that seems to be the thing, is the population is not with Netanyahu. Netanyahu has a layer of very, very hardcore supporters who want to keep this going. But, the protests around the hostages and all of that, I mean, the population of Israel is tired of this, and they're weary of this. They want the hostages to come home, and they want some kind of deal to be made, and they've wanted that for a long time. And that the polls in Israel indicate that while the Israelis, yes, tend to support the Israeli position, and they obviously don't like Hamas, they don't like the Palestinians, that they're not with Netanyahu, and that Netanyahu, many people have pointed out, he's doing this. He's prolonging this for his own reasons, that his political career will end as soon as this confrontation is over. And the population is very weary of it. And they're not behind Netanyahu on this at all, right? And that Israel is very divided. And Netanyahu's support tends to be much more recent immigrants to Israel from Eastern Europe that are much more conservative and such. But, you go to the folks who live in regions of Israel that are not settlements, right? Those folks tend to be much more liberal, and they're tired of this, right? And obviously they don't like the Palestinians, but they're tired of this. And then Netanyahu is kind of, his grip on power is very limited, and he's been keeping this going for his own reasons. That's a widespread perception that I've seen.
Did you hear Putin's answer? Speaking of Eastern immigrants, Putin was asked this by Professor Morandi, and several of the people who were at Valdai, our guest on the show. For some reason, it made me feel proud. It's like one thing of separation, 1 degree of separation. Kofi was there, Morandi was there. I know Rick Sanchez, he was there. There was somebody else that was on the show that was there. Glenn Deason has been on the show before. He was there. So there were a few people that were there. They were able to ask questions. But Morandi asked this interesting question that I think he may have been surprised by the answer that Putin gave on this. He effectively presented saying, look, Donald Trump has come up with this that I know Morandi knows is a BS plan.
Yeah.
And is putting this out there to try to get the Palestinians to sign. And effectively asking Putin, hey, what is your take on this? Are you okay with this? Is there something that Russia could do to move this along? And Putin gave this answer that, I have to be honest, surprised me, and maybe even surprised Morandi, where Putin was like, hey, I'm okay with the deal. I think it's a good deal. I think Tony Blair, and he goes into this thing talking about how he had coffee or tea with Tony Blair. And people like me are like, what the hell is with this answer? I don't understand this. I remember Sarah once before made this point of saying the number of Israelis that were in, that were Russian.
Yeah.
And because there was such a large Russian population of Israelis, that this has some, let's say not necessarily control, but awareness in Putin's mind of that population of, let's say, Russian Israelis that are in Israel. And on some level, this either constrains, some level gives some kind of context, its point of view on what is taking place there. I mean, granted, I know you can't necessarily get into his mind, but that answer is bewildering to me. Putin has to know that this is BS. He has to know that Israel is a colony of the US and it's kind of the tip of the spear going after one of the main countries that he's in alliance with, meaning being Iran. That answer is very bizarre to me. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting because at one point, President Putin was very outspoken and sympathetic to Israel and was seen as almost friendly with Netanyahu.
Right.
And since the October 7th events 2 years ago, Russia has really pivoted in an anti-Israel way and made clear that they don't approve of what Israel's doing. They've been speaking against them at the UN Security Council. And, you know, there's a much bigger gap between Russia and Israel than there has been in quite some time, and that it's quite surprising. But there is a layer of Russian-speaking Israelis, you know, who are very, very pro-Russia, and they are sympathetic to Russia, but they're very, very, very much the hardcore right-wing Likud, you know, Netanyahu supporters, and that's a layer of Israel that does exist, and I think that they were much more solidly intact. But in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of distance. I mean, you know, Russia is pretty much taking anti-Israel stances at the UN, et cetera. I mean, they do refer to Hamas as terrorists. They do argue that Israel has a, quote, right to exist. You know, they're not, you know, for the destruction of Israel. They're not, you know, anti-Israel in that sense, but they are, they're very, very opposed to what Israel is doing. I mean, again, I think that when I hear Putin saying what he's saying, and, you know, the fact that, you know, the Dr. Morandi was in the room there, I mean, I think this is more of the politics of the possible, right? They're thinking about what is actually possible. This proposal, I mean, it may be, you know, supporting it is strategic in the sense that, you know, it can lead to something else, and that it probably won't be. And I think everyone realizes, I mean, you heard Trump say, oh yeah, we're going to make sure everybody enforces it. It's like, yeah, right. You know, everyone kind of realizes this deal isn't going to be what actually comes out of it. Right. But moving to implement it could be moving toward a potentially better situation. And I think, you know, that Russia, one thing I will say about Russia is they play a long game, right? Not a short game. They're thinking long term. Right. And that, you know, if you're playing the long game, moving ahead with this deal could eventually set the stage for something better. It would be moving away from the current phase of things, which is just the endless bombardment of Gaza. Right. It would be at least putting that on hold. And there's, you know, maybe at that point, then a new situation. But yeah, like you said, the way the deal is set up, the idea that would hold and everyone would just adhere to the deal, that's not realistic at all. So what's going to happen?
What would be the long game on this? I mean, because I was thinking about this and I was trying to, there are times I try to step outside of myself to the degree that I can and say, okay, is your point of view too hardened on this? And are you looking at this in a particular way that Obviously, other world leaders may not be. And let's say if you take an, because I think Morandi was shocked by the answer, because as you point out, Russia has been taking a more strident stance against Israel. And more to the point, Israel is trying to take down one of the countries that is a fulcrum to this kind of multipolar world. I mean, Israel tried to destroy Iran, and every expectation in the world is that a new war is about to erupt between where Israel is going to attack Iran again with the United States backing on that attack. And so it's like, okay, so Russia has to know 3 a.m. between Putin and his God that Israel is a problem, especially in the context of multipolarity and that type of world, as opposed to having a hegemon in the Middle Eastern region that the U.S. is effectively backing as a proxy. And so it's like, okay, so what would be the long game on accepting this deal? Okay, yeah, the killing stops, but does it? I mean, Donald Trump had put out a tweet effectively saying, hey, the killing has stopped. And it was like 50 people died that day or were murdered that day by Israel.
Yeah.
I guess I don't see the long game for this. Is it just the moment that Israel violates the deal that the other countries are going to scream, hey, we all agreed to this deal, 15 countries, including all of Europe, and you're now violating this deal? And Trump is going to blame Hamas, and the killing is going to keep going. I guess, what is the long view of this that I may be missing?
Also, I mean, part of the deal is Hamas disarms. Part of the deal is this. I mean, there's a lot of implementation that has to go into this deal. And the question is, what gets implemented before the deal gets wrecked, right? What actually goes into effect? Obviously all of the, like, I think it's 20 points in the deal. All the 20 points don't get done immediately, right? They get done bit by bit. So how much of it gets done before Israel violates it, before, they declare, oh, Hamas violated it, so then we're going to violate it, or, what happens? Well, we'll see. We shall see. But I feel like Russia is being strategic, and that also I think it's very important that Russia make clear they are not advocating instability in the region, right? That Russia, they do want to play a stabilizing role, and that they're not, just trying to fire up the Iran opposing Israel is very much part of their identity, the revolution, the supreme leader, Khomeini called the Day of Al-Quds. The last Friday of Ramadan is a day that they talk about taking back Jerusalem, for the Palestinians and all that. So Iran has to just be completely hardlined. They cannot give Israel anything. Whereas Russia, they have to make clear their role is more as an international actor, as a world power that is trying to stabilize and bring peace. So it seems like there is a proposal on the table, and they're saying, okay, well, we can work with this. And I think that's Russia, making clear that they are a responsible kind of international actor, and they want to de-escalate things. Whereas a lot of the countries that they are very friendly with, especially Iran, they have a different way of viewing things. I feel like, again, there's more that we're not aware of.
And they might have fell back into a corner. I mean, for one, they're not going to have any say so one way or the other over the issue. And so it's like, okay, so why would we take an oppositional stance if we're not going to have any say so one way or the other? The countries that are going to be involved are going to be Middle Eastern countries. So does it benefit Russia to say, well, obviously this plan is BS, when they have no take in it, meaning they have no hand in it, they have no cards in this process? Turkey, Egypt, hell, maybe even Saudi Arabia, all of these are the countries that are going to have more hand in this, in which case they've already come out saying, we agree. So I don't know, it could just boil down to we have there's no political gain for us to be oppositional to the plan, considering we're not going to have a say so one way or the other in the plan. I don't know. You may be right. There may be stuff that we're just not seeing in this. Last thing before I let you go, Iran. Everybody that I've talked to on this channel, generals, colonels, people who are in the military, people who have been analysts, all of them have come to the same assessment that an attack is inevitable, it's imminent. Do you see it that way? That the U.S. and Israel are effectively going to hit Iran one more time? And I got to be honest, I don't see how they don't. Like, all of this is playbook stuff. The moment that you say, we're going to pass sanctions, then you already know, almost as a chess move, well, Iran is immediately going to stop working with the IAEA. All right? Iran may even pull out of the non-proliferation treaty. all right, both these rational acts from putting sanctions on them and snapback sanctions. China and Russia said, we're not going to participate in this. We're out. And on top of that, the U.S. will then comes up and say, well, we're concerned now about nuclear material. And Israel will say, well, we're also concerned about nuclear material. Meaning, it's not like sanctions is a pretext that you can follow kind of a logic way of saying, well, the U.S. is going to come back with this argument of, well, we can't allow Iran to get nukes. They're going to have nukes in 20 minutes. And so we need to actually have some kind of strike. On top of that, it was reported right here. There's reports now that the United States is talking about piracy with regards to Iran, that they're trying to, or considering, stealing ships and the cargo in those ships. Now, the U.S. is apparently pressuring the regional actors, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, to assist in the pirating. These countries have resisted up to this point. Iran has made the point of saying, touch our ships, we're going to go nuclear. Meaning, I don't mean that in the literal sense of nuclear weapons. I just mean we're going to lose it. Effectively saying right here, Al-Mayadeen reported, quoted Iranian sources saying that all signs have been detected that the U.S. preparations to obstruct or interfere with the movement of Iranian commercial ships under the pretext of enforcing sanctions. According to the report, any such U.S. action will, quote, face immediate and decisive response, unquote. Iranian sources also said, or told Al-Mayadeen, that both the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Navy, and the Iranian Army's Navy, that's right, because those are two different things, are fully prepared to neutralize any threat targeting maritime security in the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. And this last part, Al-Mayadeen added that any move against Iranian commercial or civilian vessels would be met with immediate reaction from Iran's naval forces and coastal missile bases along the country's southern shores. I guess first question is, do you believe them? There's that. And two, give me your expectation in the way that this unfolds. This seems like it's headed towards imminent war.
Well, Iran their behavior here is completely rational.
Yes.
Iran has never been trying to get a nuclear weapon, and they have always fully complied with all of their obligations under the non-proliferation treaty. Then on top of that, they made a deal with the Obama administration and gave up almost all of their peaceful nuclear energy program. In exchange for that deal, they got bombed and attacked, and they got more sanctions imposed on them. They got Qasem Soleimani murdered. And the latest development is that the International Atomic Energy Agency, which oversees Iran's nuclear sites, would not condemn the U.S. attack on their facility. And at that point, it was just such a slap in the face. The IAEA oversees nuclear facilities, and rather than condemn the United States attacking and blowing up a nuclear site, they went out of their way to find some excuse that Iran's not, they didn't cross the I or dot the T's, and they condemned Iran in that situation. So at that point, the IAEA is just acting in such a blatantly partisan way and just kind of going out of its way to disrespect Iran. Iran's saying, you know what? Fine, we're just pulling out. And it makes complete sense that they would do that, right? When you have an international body that is supposed to protect, nuclear sites and oversee the protection, and the United States blows it up, and they don't say anything about it, and they don't condemn what the USA did. At that point, what are you going to do? I mean, you have to pull out. I mean, you have to make a statement. The IAEA has acted in such a blatantly partisan way and has gone out of its way to disrespect Iran. I mean, how can you have such an entity in your country monitoring your nuclear sites if they're okay with other countries attacking them? I mean, that's just, that's
agreed.
Yeah,
that was just agreed.
Yeah.
One of my guests was pointing out, like, it's so wild that diplomacy is not added, but that's just it. Diplomacy was added to it. I mean, I think what some people miss is that this has nothing to do with nukes. This has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with the fact that Iran exists, that it breathes air.
Yeah.
That this idea for diplomacy, well, Iran did go through diplomacy. They were attacked in the middle of diplomacy. And piracy is an act of war. Like, by any stretch of the imagination, you stealing boats is an act of war. Yeah. And so it's like, what negotiation are we going to engage with you in when you've attacked us in the last negotiations that we were taking part in? We were negotiating in good faith. And over again, there was this escalation of demands just beyond the horizon, where you can always create this thing of, well, Iran is not giving us what we want. All of this stuff was playbook, pathway to Persia. And so, I mean, yeah, you would want an irrational, normal world where international law exists, where you can have diplomacy and diplomats. But even in that context, the idea that the U.S. gets to tell another country that they can't have nukes when Israel has nukes, the U.S. has nukes, Iran is a sovereign country, that's nonsense to me. That's nonsense to me. Yeah, I agree with you, Caleb. I don't know what else you do in that situation. You could say, please don't take my boats. You could send a strongly worded letter. That is going to be fundamentally ignored. Give me your take. One last, I guess, what time is it? One last question on this. This idea of requiring a response. I mean, obviously, what the United States wants is an escalatory ladder. And stealing a boat will be similar to murdering people in Venezuela. There's a force distribution difference between Venezuela and Iran, where Iran has a force distribution that can actually impart cost. But Iran, up to this point, has done any and everything in their power to stay out of a larger conflict with the U.S., including in that last conflict where they were willing to take that off-ramp. That was, Israel is the one that was begging for the war to stop. But at the point where Iran was bombed, they were willing to make the deal with the U.S. of, okay, you bomb us, we bomb you, we call it a day. Do you think this will be quantitatively different? And I guess the reason why I asked about the ship thing, do you believe that they would do it, considering up to this point that they've done everything in their power under the guise of pragmatism?
We've been through this before. There's been Iranian ships that have been seized. They hold them for a little while. Iran does some, seizes some other ships. I think we've been through this before. I don't think it's going to be a huge game changer if this escalates. It shouldn't happen. I mean, obviously, it shouldn't happen, but I don't see it as something that's going to be like, oh gosh, the USA grabs an Iranian ship and then we have a nuclear war. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it will be, if it happens, it will be a bad situation. Iran will retaliate and probably, bring their ships very close to American ships, maybe even seize an American ship and hold some sailors. They've done that before. These maritime games are kind of standard between the USA and Iran at this point. They're almost, part of the, it's just kind of par for the course. Unfortunately, it's not good. It's a violation of Iran's sovereignty, and the USA is the aggressor, and they always manage to make it sound like somehow Iran is the one being aggressive every time they do this. But the US media makes it sound like it just came out of nowhere. It's always they never give the context of what's going on. And, and bring our boys home and, and all of that. But at the same time, I don't feel like this will be the end of the world. If it does happen, it'll be something that Iran has dealt with before, something the United States has done before. Iran is capable of retaliating, and it'll just be an unfortunate escalation. And, it'll be very important. It'll be something that Netanyahu can politically gain from. It can be something that Trump can gain from by saying, look what I'm doing. I'm fighting Iran. And, you remember when in South Korea, right? Iran had its own money in South Korea that was frozen. Mm-hmm. Biden made some kind of deal, so Iran's money was unfrozen. And what we heard, the narrative that we got in Western media was Biden gave so many $1 million to Iran. He didn't give them.
Yes.
The USA stole their money, froze their money, and in exchange for something, unfroze it, right? That's not giving Iran, but that's the Israel. Oh, they're giving all this money to Iran. No, they're not giving them any money. They stole and then unstole
their money, right?
Yeah, right.
It's their own money. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's you can't trust American media to ever talk about anything related to Iran in a rational way. I will say I am disappointed because for a while it seemed like U.S. coverage of North Korea was getting to be sane, but now they've backed away from that, right? And they're running stories that remind me of the Bush years, the stories that they're running where they take something that happened in North Korea that is, and they wildly exaggerate it in order to just make fun of them, and people don't know what's going on. I mean, have you seen this? I mean, a classic example during the Bush years, or I think it was during the Obama administration, in North Korea, they had an archaeological site, and it was the tomb of a unicorn, right? It was just, that's what the writing on it said, right? And it was just, okay. So all the American media, North Korea believes in unicorns. And it's like, that's not what it is. They just found an archaeological site, and the writing was, it had mythological stuff on it or whatever, right? Well, now the latest thing with North Korea is they're doing this whole thing about North Korea. Kim Jong-un has said, look, we don't believe in, cosmetic surgery. We don't think women should, we don't think it's a good use of resources for women to be getting boob jobs, right? And I mean, that makes sense. You can understand a country that's facing sanctions and all that. We shouldn't be wasting our resources on things like that. And that they have kind of a very socially conservative aspect of their socialism. So Kim Jong-un made like a passing remark. We don't believe in that. They're saying, oh, North Korea is having a crackdown on boobs. They're inspecting. It's like, that's not what's happening. And it's frustrating to watch American media do this, right? And what's frustrating is it's like, if you actually read between the lines in the story, all that happened is the leader of North Korea said, look, we don't want to be like the West. We don't want to have, people wasting money and resources on cosmetic surgeries and things like that, which is a perfectly defensible thing to say. But of course, in American media, they make it, they be silly about it. Right. And that's kind of, it's the same with the Iran coverage. They always find like it becomes, like they're going out of their way to not tell you what's actually happening, to just kind of play silly games. So, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how I interpret a lot of this stuff.
I don't know about you, but personally, I prefer women to be natural. Like I mean, to each his own, of course. People can get whatever they want. But yeah, I've always been more of a sucker for people who look normal.
Okay,
that's just me. Caleb, and that has nothing to do with the story at all. I was like, there's a war on boobs in North Korea.
All right.
Yeah, I understand where they're coming from. It's under sanctions. You have to save your materials, and yeah, it's more of a conservative society. Caleb, as I say, you can talk about some of anything. You have my deepest appreciation for it. You are great at this, and I thank you for it. Caleb Maupin, speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. Give 2 of your books, because I have this one, Kamala Harris. That one is old. There was another one about the shooting that took place with the gentleman. I can't think of the exact name of it, but you know the name of these books. Please give us the name of these books.
Yeah, well, we got Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. That's my latest, right? This book has been getting a lot of attention lately. What is a counter gang? I noticed there's been a couple of YouTube channels that did reviews of it. It's a chapter from one of my bigger books. I made it a small kind of pamphlet. What is a counter gang? And it's gotten quite a bit of attention for what I said.
What is a counter gang?
Yeah, well, you have to read the book and find out, right?
Fair enough.
The term was coined by Frank Kitson, the guy who led the British operations in Kenya against the Mau Mau Land and Freedom Army.
Oh, you and I spoke about this. Yeah, we've had a show about this.
Right.
Okay.
And it's a way to confuse the resistance, a way to confuse and it's an effective counterinsurgency strategy. But in this book, I get into great detail about counter gangs. What is a counter gang? So check it out. Yeah.
Basically counter operations or counterinsurgencies in countries themselves. Yeah, we had a really good conversation. That video actually did quite well.
Yeah.
Video did quite well. Caleb, man, you have my deepest appreciation. By the way, the Center for Political Innovation, that is the organization that Caleb is associated with. Also, you can check him out on his YouTube channel, Caleb Maupin. Caleb, you have a fantastic day, man.
You too. Always fun. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right. Caleb, shout out to Caleb. Shout out to